I wasn't ready. I saw the changes, but I didn't want to see them. He still smiled, still told his old jokes like everything was fine. But the signs were there. Quiet signs, gentle whispers that something was shifting. And a year later, he was gone. If someone you love is growing older, please stay with me for the next few minutes. These are 5 subtle warnings I wish I had understood sooner. Not to scare you, but to help you see what I couldn't. So maybe, just maybe, you'll be ready in a way I wasn't. Sometimes it's just a feeling. They start sleeping more, talking less, leaving food on their plate. They say things like, I don't want to be a burden, or I've lived a good life. And part of you knows something is shifting, but the world keeps moving. And you tell yourself maybe they're just tired. Maybe it's nothing. You smile. They smile. But deep inside, there's a quiet ache, a whisper you try to ignore. Are we saying goodbye without even knowing it? This video isn't here to scare you. It's here to prepare you with compassion, with knowledge, and with love. Because when we understand what's happening, we can respond with grace. What follows are 5 subtle but serious signs that someone you love may be in their final year of life. And most importantly, what you can still do about it. Because even in the quietest moments, there's still room for connection, for dignity, and for saying the things that matter most. Joan was 85 when her daughter first noticed the change. Every morning, for as long as anyone could remember, Joan had made pancakes. Not just for herself, but for anyone who happened to be in her kitchen. She had a knack for flipping them just right, crispy edges, warm blueberries inside, always with a side of sweet laughter. But one morning, the griddle stayed cold. When her daughter asked, Joan shrugged and said she just wasn't hungry. That became more frequent. Meals would go untouched. Favorite treats lost their charm. It wasn't about taste anymore. It was as if her appetite had quietly packed its bags and left. At first, the family thought it was just a phase. Maybe she had a cold. Maybe she was just tired. But deep down, her daughter felt something had shifted. This subtle sign, loss of appetite, is more than a passing moment. As the body prepares for its final chapter, systems begin to slow down. The digestive system isn't as efficient. The body doesn't crave food in the same way. Even the signals that once said, I'm hungry, grow faint. This is a natural process, but it can be heartbreaking to witness, especially when food has always been a source of comfort and connection. It's easy to panic, to push food, to plead, but often that only adds stress. So what can you do instead? First, focus on quality, not quantity. Offer small portions of soft, nutrient-dense foods, things that are easier to chew and digest. Think soups, smoothies, scrambled eggs. The goal isn't to force a full plate, it's to make each bite count. Second, and this is even more important, be there. Sit beside them. Share a quiet meal, even if they take only a few bites. Sometimes, the simple act of being present brings more nourishment than the food itself. Talk about the past. Laugh about old stories. Let meals become moments of connection, not obligation. Because at this stage, eating is no longer just about survival. It's about memory, comfort, dignity. Joan's daughter eventually stopped asking her to finish her plate. Instead, she brought a small tray with 2 teacups and a slice of toast cut in half. They'd sit by the window, sip tea, and talk about the birds outside. It wasn't about pancakes anymore. It was about being together while they still had time. If you've noticed a loved one eating less, don't ignore it. But don't fight it either. Listen, observe, and most of all, be there. Because in the quiet retreat of appetite, there's often a deeper message. It's time to slow down together. Frank, at 91, had always been an early riser. He loved the quiet mornings, sipping coffee while watching the sunrise, greeting the day with energy that seemed boundless. But last winter, something changed. He started sleeping in longer than usual. Not just a quick nap in the afternoon, but deep, extended slumbers. His daughter, Margaret, noticed the shift one weekend when she arrived at his house at noon, expecting him to be up and dressed. Instead, he was still tucked under his blanket, his room dark and silent. "Dad, you're still asleep?" Margaret asked, a mix of concern and confusion in her voice. "I guess I just didn't wake up," Frank replied. his voice a little more sluggish than usual. It wasn't the first time either. Over the past few months, the pattern had become more frequent, sleeping through the morning, dozing off during the day. For someone as active as Frank had been, this was unsettling. But Margaret chalked it up to old age, thinking it was just part of the natural process. However, as the days passed, the sleeping habits didn't seem to stop. They became a constant. The thing is, when a person enters their later years, changes like these, sleeping more than usual, can often be one of the first signs of something deeper. It's not just about needing extra rest. The body is slowing down. As we age, our metabolism changes and the need for recovery increases. The body starts to conserve energy more efficiently, especially when it's not being used as much. Reduced physical activity leads to slower circulation, which means the body doesn't get the same level of stimulation it once did. The result? Increased sleep, longer naps, more hours spent in bed. This is completely natural, but can be confusing. Frank wasn't sick. He wasn't depressed. He didn't seem to be in pain, but he was still sleeping more and more. What can you do? First, it's essential to understand that this is a common part of aging. The body needs time to recharge, and if sleep is one of the ways it does that, then it's okay. However, it's also important to help your loved one maintain a healthy rhythm. Sleeping too much during the day can affect the ability to sleep at night, creating a disorienting cycle. To keep things balanced, encourage gentle routines. Use natural light to help regulate the body's internal clock. Exposure to sunlight during the day can help signal to the brain that it's time to be awake and alert. In addition, soft music or soothing sounds can create a calming atmosphere in the home, helping to regulate day and night rhythms. Keeping active with light exercise, like a walk or simple stretching, can also help prevent excessive daytime drowsiness. Frank's daughter, Margaret, started leaving the blinds open in his room each morning so that the natural sunlight could filter in. They also started listening to calm music in the mornings to help him feel more energized. And while Frank still slept a lot, those little changes made his days a bit brighter. Sleeping more isn't necessarily something to fear, but it's important to pay attention to. It could be the body's way of telling us it's slowing down, taking a step back. If you've noticed a loved one sleeping more, try to understand the underlying cause. Keep them active, even in small ways. Ensure they get plenty of natural light, and help them create a peaceful daily rhythm. Most of all, be patient. Just as Frank's daughter learned, every change comes with a quiet lesson. Mary had always been the social one. She loved catching up with her sister and on the phone every single day. Their conversations were filled with laughter, stories of their families, the latest book Mary was reading, and the daily happenings in the neighborhood. They had been doing this for years, their bond as sisters strengthened by their daily exchanges. But as time went on, something started to change. The calls grew shorter, then less frequent. At first, and I didn't think much of it, Mary had always been busy, and maybe she was just going through a phase. But soon, the calls became once a week, then once every 2 weeks, and eventually silence. Mary stopped calling altogether and couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She visited Mary one afternoon, worried that maybe she wasn't feeling well or something had happened. When it arrived at Mary's house, it was quiet. Mary was sitting in her favorite chair, looking out the window, her hands resting in her lap, and sat down beside her, waiting for her sister to speak, but Mary didn't say anything. "How have you been, Mary?" and asked softly. Mary turned her head slightly, offering a small smile. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice quiet, almost distant, and had grown used to Mary's animated conversations, her stories, her laughter. But today there was none of that. The spark she had once seen in her sister was barely there. "I miss our talks," and said, hoping to draw Mary back into their familiar rhythm. Mary simply nodded and felt a pang of sadness. She knew her sister wasn't physically ill, but something had shifted. It was as if Mary had retreated into herself, losing the desire to interact, to share. What was happening? This kind of withdrawal from social interaction is common in older adults, particularly when energy levels begin to decrease. It can also be a sign of depression, which, unfortunately, can affect many elderly people. As the body's physical strength declines, so too does the desire to engage with the world around them. Conversations become more difficult, as the energy it takes to maintain them feels overwhelming. It's easy to think that your loved one is just forgetting to call, or that they're being rude or unloving. But in reality, it's a deeper issue. The mind and body are simply tired. What can you do? First and foremost, don't pressure them to talk. Sometimes, the effort of engaging in a conversation can be exhausting for someone who's dealing with fatigue or emotional withdrawal. Instead, be present. Sit quietly with them. Hold their hand. Your presence will speak louder than any words you could offer. When Mary's sister, Anne, began sitting with her in silence, just being there without the pressure to speak, Mary seemed to relax. She wasn't expected to talk or respond, just to be, and would gently squeeze her hand, and they would simply sit together, watching the world outside. Over time, Mary began to open up more, in her own way, when she was ready. Some days, it was a simple hello or I'm okay. Other days, she shared stories from the past, small memories that meant something to her. The key was patience. The key was presence. So, if you notice someone you love becoming quieter, more withdrawn, don't assume it's simply about forgetfulness or stubbornness. It may be a sign that they are feeling emotionally drained, disconnected, or even depressed. Give them space, but don't leave them alone. Sometimes, the greatest comfort we can offer is just to sit quietly, without expectations, letting them know they're not forgotten, even when words aren't enough. John had always been a man of stories. His life was filled with colorful tales from his younger days, especially the years he spent in the military. He often spoke of the friendships he forged, the battles he fought, and the places he traveled. But recently, his stories had started to change. Instead of talking about the present or his plans for the future, John seemed to revisit the past more and more. He would tell the same stories over and over, repeating them as if they were brand new. "I remember the war more than I remember what I had for lunch yesterday," he would say with a distant smile, his mind drifting back to a time long ago. At first, his daughter, Sarah, didn't think much of it. She assumed it was just John's way of reminiscing, perhaps driven by nostalgia. But as the repetition continued, she began to wonder if something deeper was at play. Why did he keep repeating the same stories? Why did he seem to be so focused on the past? It wasn't just about the war either. John would often talk about his childhood, his family, his friends, the places he had been. Even when Sarah tried to bring up current events or talk about her own life, John's mind seemed to wander back to the past. So, Sarah decided to ask him about it. One day, she gently asked, "Dad, why do you talk about the past so much lately?" John looked at her with a wistful expression. "The past is all I have left," he said softly. "The world today feels so different, and sometimes I feel like I'm slipping away. But those memories, they're still with me. They remind me that I was once strong, once young, once full of life." It was then that Sarah realized something profound. John wasn't just repeating his stories because he had forgotten the present. He was clinging to them for comfort. As the world around him grew quieter and his physical health declined, the past became his anchor. It was a time when he felt most alive, most in control. The present, with all its challenges, seemed foreign to him. This is something that happens to many elderly individuals as they age. As the body slows down and the present becomes more difficult to navigate, the brain often turns to long-term memories. These memories are easier to access, and they provide a sense of comfort and familiarity. It's not uncommon for older adults to dwell on the past, repeating stories from their younger years as a way to relive those moments of joy, excitement, and strength. So, what can you do when you notice this happening? The first thing is to let them share their stories. Even if they repeat themselves, those stories are a part of who they are. They shape their lives, their experiences, and their worldview. Listening to them is a way of honoring their journey. You can also take the opportunity to record these stories. Write them down, film them, or simply listen with an open heart. These are precious moments that, one day, may be all that's left. Most importantly, let them know that their life has meaning. Tell them that their stories matter, that their experiences are valuable. It's easy for older adults to feel invisible as they age, especially when they begin to retreat into the past. But by showing them that their history is important, you give them the dignity and respect they deserve. John's stories weren't just memories. They were the fabric of his identity, the proof that he had lived a full life. And as Sarah sat with him, listening to his stories once again, she realized that in those moments, she was not only hearing the past, but connecting with the man who had lived it. Ruth had always been a woman of grace and strength. She had a collection of beautiful jewelry passed down through generations, and she wore each piece with pride. But one quiet morning, Ruth called her granddaughter into the room and handed her a small, delicate box. "This is for you," she said softly, a hint of emotion in her voice. Inside the box was a set of vintage earrings, a family heirloom that had been in Ruth's family for decades. At first, her granddaughter, Emma, thought it was just a kind gesture. Ruth had always been generous, and Emma assumed that this was just another example of her grandmother's love. But as the days passed, Ruth began to speak more about her possessions, her memories, and the things she wanted to pass on. "When I'm gone," she would say quietly, "I want you to have these things. They're part of who I am." It wasn't that Ruth was giving up. It wasn't that she was tired of life. What she was doing was preparing, quietly, but with purpose. She was laying the foundation for those she loved to continue on without her. These weren't just material items. They were pieces of her life, her history, and her identity. And by giving them away, she was telling Emma that she trusted her to carry that legacy forward. This is something that often happens as people age. As they get older, they begin to think more about their legacy, about what they will leave behind. They start to make peace with the fact that their time on earth is finite, and they begin to prepare for the inevitable. This isn't about giving up. It's about entrusting the people they love with the things that matter most to them. It's important to understand that when an elderly person begins to give things away, they're not necessarily ready to say goodbye. Instead, they're trying to make the process of letting go a little easier for themselves and for their loved ones. They may feel a sense of comfort knowing that the things they cherished will continue to hold meaning, even after they are gone. So, what should you do if you notice a loved one beginning to let go of their possessions or speak about their death? It's natural to feel a sense of fear or sadness. But instead of panicking or brushing off their words, it's important to acknowledge what they're doing. They're not asking for your sadness or worry. They're simply asking for your love and understanding. You can show your support by accepting what they're offering, whether it's a physical object or a piece of wisdom. You can listen to their stories, talk about the memories they're sharing, and let them know that their life has had a profound impact on you. Don't try to deny the reality of the situation, but don't let fear take over either. Just love them through the process. Ruth's gift wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a message. She was telling Emma, "I trust you to carry on. I trust you to continue what I've started." And that simple, heartfelt gesture was more powerful than any material possession could ever be. It was a sign of love, trust, and the enduring bond that connected them across generations. These signs aren't always about death. Sometimes they reflect the quiet changes in how someone wants to live their final chapter. It's not about the end, but about how they choose to spend the time they have left, often with a deeper sense of meaning, of letting go, or of holding on to what matters most. Don't be afraid of these signs. Don't shy away from them. Instead, listen to them. Stand by their side. If you've noticed any of these signs in someone you love, this is your moment. This is the time to stop, to make that phone call, to visit, to hold their hand just a little tighter, to let them know they're not alone. Share this video with others who might need it. And if you've walked this path before, if you've seen these signs in your own life, please share your story with us in the comments. Your voice could be the comfort someone else needs tonight. Let's continue to support each other through life's most difficult moments.